Now, good evening and welcome to Beyond the Numbers on Joy News, where we break down the critical issues shaping Ghana's economy, politics, and everyday life. I am Isaac Kofiaje, and joining me, as always, is my insightful colleague, Winston Taki. Tonight, we dive into a pressing issue that's sparking heated debate across the nation, the state of our power sector.
That's right, Isaac. Ghana's new president, John Dramani Mahama, is barely settling into office, but he's already facing a looming power crisis. Fuel supply restrictions are threatening the nation's already fragile electricity generation capacity, leaving Ghanaians wondering, can the lights stay on?
And while we are addressing the fuel supply hurdle is critical, the conversation is shifting towards bold reforms. Both the president and his nominee for Ministry of Energy, or the Minister for Energy, John Jinapor, are calling for the privatization of the last point of electricity generation or distribution handled by the ECG. It's a controversial proposal, one that could redefine the future of electricity delivery in Ghana.
But will the privatization help stabilize the power supply and improve efficiency, or will it lead to higher costs and limited access to ordinary Ghanaians? Tonight, we'll analyze the numbers, the policies, and the potential outcomes as we tackle the big question, keeping the lights on, the ECG privatization that is going on.
Now, of course, stay with us. We'll be back after this short break. I will take you to the smart wall for all the analysis.
The question is, do we have the power? Whether we have the power as a nation, whether the power can be sustained, what are the key challenges facing the Ghana's electricity sector? Many are of the fear that whether what John Mahama's government previously faced, that popularly known as Dumso, is it something that is about to be opened? Basically, they can. Many are quite not optimistic about the prospect. But however, he's giving assurance to that effect, which will be taking you through the numbers.
Now, on the smart wall, big here is President Mahama's assurance. He says that, look, we need to have a very frantic conversation about the last part of energy distribution in the country, which is handled by the ECG. He's talking about or proposing the privatization of the last point of distribution of our energy supply. And he's saying that if you bring in the private guys, it will save us a lot, and it could move us from the regular power, challenges that we have in the country. He's saying that, look, this is going to be technical, but they are going to speak to a very important entity, the World Bank, to actually help with the technicality of the side of the privatization. So it means that government wants to handle this, but it's not going to do it alone. It is going to consult the World Bank.
He assumes that indeed he's been already having conversation with the World Bank going back to the Millennium Compact too, and that is something that government has not sustained, the previous government has not sustained, but he perceives that although Ghana went through the phases of the compact, the final space where the distribution aspect was about to be prioritized, that also was when Ghana aborted that particular concept. But however, he finds the need to go back because there are some provisions, especially access to money, considering how much debt is ravaging the energy sector.
Now, Winston, you spoke about money, and money in the energy sector is very, very important. This week, we've realized that if President John Dramani Mahama wants to salvage the situation, he needs about $90 million. I mean, if WAPCO is going to go ahead with a pigging exercise between January 20th and February 16th, then there's a gaping hole of about 1,100 megawatts of power that will be a deficit, and they have to solve it. He needs to find about $90 million to buy liquid fuel. And we understand that they've been able to speak to WAPCO, and they are on the same tangent with the government, the same wavelength, trying to say that, look, if you want some weeks to procure fuel, In fact, they understand that the maintenance was supposed to be done somewhere October of last year, but the Ministry of Energy said that they needed some time to buy fuel. It turns out that first quarter of the year, we've still not been able to have that liquid fuel that we need to find as an alternative. But Winston, moving away from what Mahama has been saying, I think that it is now important to talk about one entity in the distribution chain. And in fact, when you talk about electricity in Ghana, the first name that comes to mind is ECG.
The father of distribution. Most countries in Africa find energy critical because it spurs up industrialization. Any policy that any government wants to make into reality, it has to ensure that that policy is hinged on supply of energy. Consistently, there's been whether Ghana will embark on this needed plan to build industries, to build businesses, to support sustainability of the economy. We've seen growth trajectory moving out only in 2024. We've seen it moving to 7.2%, and that is something the government intends to sustain. However, going into the new government's policy, they perceive that there's a lot of work that has to be done, but it cannot be done if we don't have sustainable energy supply. ECG, the key mandate, consistently the cash waterfall mechanism that was introduced in 2020 as part of the energy recovery levy or program was something that was intended to ensure there's transparency and there's equity, especially in the power sector. We have key stakeholders such as ECG itself, such as PURC, Public Utility and Regulatory Commission.
All the IPPs,
all of them playing key role in ensuring sector. But the issue that has consistently been on the neck of ECG is whether they are transparent with how much they collect, or how much is distributed through the price cash waterfall mechanism. That is what we're going to delve deeper into.
I think that the regulatory body has been speaking, that's the PRC.
Yes.
They've been putting out the validation report of the cash waterfall mechanism. And Winston, what we are learning from the report put out so far is that, look, ECG isn't declaring everything that it has collected. And under the cash waterfall mechanism, we call it cash waterfall mechanism is because it's supposed to be a pool of resources, or say, let's say, money for all the sector players to come there, get their portion of the cake. ECG is the one that is supposed to be doing the collection. But it turns out that, the PRC has a challenge. The challenge is that ECG isn't reporting all that they earn. And we also understand from the IMF programs and then also the PURC's report that this is an entity, and we are talking about the ECG, that runs more than 61 accounts. They say ECG Bako accounts Bibri. Somewhere about 61 bank accounts. And the suggestion or the recommendation by the IMF was that, look, merge all these accounts into one centralized account so that we can track the flow of your revenue. And it turns out that ECG hasn't really been able to consolidate all the accounts.
There has been countless under recoveries, according to data from the PURC, since the under recoveries was around 200 million Ghana cedis. However, as we speak, in December 2024, it appeared it's hinging around 6.7 billion. And that is a key concern, concerning how much ECG is supposed to collect to ensure the sustainability or the flow of finances, to ensure individual power producers have their monies moving on. But key concern, some have said, key speakers, or let's say individuals within the power sector are saying that indeed that particular collection does not necessarily mean that the government or the ECG owns 61 banks. But data is what we work with. We don't just work with us.
Yeah, they have, according to them, they have 61 bank accounts, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they are saying that is not the case, but the monies flow through the Ghana.gov, which is an online portal for government-related transaction, and that is what they perceive is happening. However, there are some undisclosed amounts that I suppose are not going through the system, but rather going to the banks where the right amount is not being reported.
Now, we've been looking at the data, looking at ECG's revenue that they've been disclosing, plus what has been put out by the PRC in the cash waterfall mechanism or the validation report. And you can see on the big wall here that there is a big difference between the revenues that ECG gets versus what they report in the cash waterfall mechanism.
Yes.
Now, looking at 1.3 billion Ghana cedis, that was the actual monthly revenue according to the math that we have done so far. But per what we gather from the cash waterfall mechanism report that is being put out by the PRC, you could get an average of, let's say, 700 million Ghana cedis. What is the difference? The difference is huge. Now, I mean, the difference is really, really huge. If you compare 1.3 billion to about, let's say, 700 million, definitely the difference becomes huge. And that is why I think that when the president called for that,
rationalization,
maybe privatizing that last point of distribution, because we are beginning to learn something that if you digitalize ECG, if you privatize certain parts of ECG, it is going to help with the revenue. How do we know this? We know that if you compare the 2022 revenues of ECG to that of 2023, there is a significant jump. And once you take us through this analysis, you could see that when they brought on board certain entities, and we'll be analyzing that, what we've seen, the small privatization that they've done in terms of the collection or the power purchasing, we've seen an improvement in ECG's revenue from, let's say, close to 8.7 billion Ghana cedis to about 15.8 billion Ghana cedis.
That is a very commendable. If you look at the numbers do talk. And if you want to assess the performance of an entity, look at the inception and the outcome based on the introduction of a third party, especially in terms of collection. HAPTIL, which became a key concern in the media. Except the Africa Center for Energy Policy has consistently been advocating for transparency in how much is the HAPTIL, which became part of the ECG's collection, because many were of the view that ECG had its own app. That is the ECG
the ECG power app.
Yes, and according to sources that are undisclosed, they attested to the fact that indeed that particular IT department as ECG collapsed at a point, and therefore they had to bring in this individual independent.
Yeah, there was actually a software sabotage, right?
Exactly. That became a key concern. And what I can confirm is that that particular power app was something that ECG began before HAPTIL built upon. However, the under-recoveries and the cost became a key concern. But if you look at the effect, it really showed that indeed ECG has collected money. But what people should prioritize indeed is that the engagement of digitalization in the sector has yielded a result. Looking at the numbers now from 8.69 to 15.7.
Definitely. If you look at it on that tangent, this is what we are talking about. 81.3% increment in just 1 year, 365 days. ECG has been able to ramp up its revenues by almost, let's say, 81.3%.
Even though there has been still under recovery,
there's still a lot of under recovery in the sector. And for President John Dramani Mahama, this is the reason why he is calling for that privatization of the last point of ECG, because they believe that what ECG is supposed to collect versus what they collect, according to the PRC, there is a big gap. And if you are able to privatize, bring in the private sector, ensure efficiency, just like the word President Mahama used, then you should be able to be chalking some of these gains. Maybe consistently, we may see ECG's revenues at a certain point, maybe hitting about 30 billion Ghana cedis. How do you do it? You need to bring in the private guys who will be able to also assess it. This, for us, is emphatic, looking at the trend analysis. And you can see that 15.75 billion revenue of ECG in 2023 definitely looks like, or is an outlier in all of these years. Now, we know that 2020, 2021, the PDS inception, so we do not have data for ECG around that time. But the average has always been around, let's say, 6.5 billion Ghana cedis. Now we are talking about close to 16 billion Ghana cedis, Winston.
It's a very interesting numbers. As a private entity, if I'm to go into business, this numbers tells me that indeed I'm in the right.
There's money. Yeah, I mean, there's money.
However, as a private business, selling a public good, is the product now is light. Light is an elastic commodity, and everyone who needs it for industrial or commercial domestic purposes. All these come to play. And if I'm to assess where individuals, my customers are, and the ability to afford, that means that people who are living in rural areas may not be my target. That should be the key concern if we are to decide to go into privatization. And that means that people will rather, who are into business of selling light, will not prioritize selling it to those in the rural areas. They will look at where business and factories are. For instance, mining sectors, they pay huge. I prefer to sell my light to mining companies who are ready to pay me cash instead of selling it to 5 individuals living in a rural area who will pay less than what I've estimated. I'm a businessman, and that should be a key concern. As to how the government will handle that particular notion, we are yet to see.
But I think that beyond the whole revenue, ramping up the revenue, bringing the private sector, one aspect of ECG that I always say has been, like a spoke in the ECG revenue mobilization, whole equation, is the fact that ECG does most of their operations in dollars, right? They buy fuel in dollars to produce the power. If they are buying meters and everything, almost all the technical things are done, most of the big technical things are done in dollars. And ECG goes ahead to sell this power in cedis. So whenever they collect the revenue and they are back paying their debts that they owe in dollars, especially the independent power producers who at the moment, if you look at the thermal component of our energy mix, it's about more than 60%, right? So that tells you that if the economy breathes well, ECG will also breathe well. Because if ECG start the year with, let's say, $1, let's say this year start with $1 to 15 cedis, right? And then let's say when we get to the second quarter of the year, you have $1 to about 18 cedis or 17 cedis. The key question is, that sudden change in forest, that sudden forest loss, where is ECG going to find in that short period of time? How are they going to ramp up, revenue, and close that gap? That is why I think that the good thing for me, I was very happy when I saw that as part of his first engagement, the President Mahama spoke to the World Bank guys because they know a lot about Ghana's energy sector. And we are saying that the latest report on the country's energy sector, which is from the World Bank, estimate that, look, if the incoming government or from 2025, this year onward, if we're supposed to do the current business as usual, where we leave everything to chance, then shortfalls in the energy sector could hit about, let's say, $7 billion. And I'm sure Mahama will be looking at that data and saying, no, I'm not sure my government can find $7 billion every year to support the energy sector. That is why he's calling for privatization. Do you think that this is a good move, and how will it close that huge gap? For me, $7 billion, really huge.
I was thinking from a different angle that has to do with the kind of negotiation we went in with these independent power producers who sell the power to ECG in dollars. The same agreement that they went from the onset has not changed. The only thing that has changed is the economy, the cedi depreciation, and that is reflective in the amount that we owe. So you realize that the dollar shortfall, the forex losses is huge because they are there. The debt are the same numbers, just increasing and ballooning due to the depreciation of the cedi. So those independent power producers have a case and point in this time. You need them no matter where you pass. You still owe them even as of now. That is what makes the cash waterfall mechanism very critical. However, I still have an issue with the cash waterfall mechanism because producers like Gridco and VRA, all of them tend to benefit from collection from ECG. However, VRA and Gridco also sell power to some mining companies, to some factories and businesses at exorbitant prices. Why are not those monies going to ECG?
They might not like that word.
Why are all those monies not going to ECG? Because if ECG collects some amount of money, and by that same mechanism, that money goes to stakeholders within the sector, including Gridco, including VRA, why are they also not reporting how much they collect in terms of revenue? So I believe these numbers would have been much more if there's clear transparency. Nobody's holding back information or data in regards to how much Ghanaians are paying in light, how much businesses are paying in light, because if you see consistently, the cost of production energy is huge. There are universities in this country, there are hospitals in this country, there are departments and agencies in this country that do not pay electricity.
Now, Winston, talking about fair data or data that's available. I think that fortunately for us, we have access to this Haptel data. This is the mobile money app, the monthly revenue collection that Haptel has been doing. So what we know is this is 2023 and 2024. So what you see is that the 2023 one was without Haptel.
That is the one below.
Yeah,
2023 is below.
Yeah.
And 2024 is above.
Yes, exactly, with Haptel. So when Haptel comes in, what you see is that we've seen collections going up by some 53.6%. Would you say that this is just the monthly collection or revenue collection in the app, for instance? Let me take you through all of them. If you look at the USSD monthly one too, the same thing, right? In dollar terms, the same thing. Also having, the same thing. So you see that all the data is actually improving when you talk about Haptel. My question is, should this be enough evidence? Many have said that, look, you are enjoying high tariff now, it's automatic tariff adjustment. There are so many things that ECG itself had to go out and do revenue collection. They had to crack down on so many. You mentioned some of the institutions and what have you. But many are saying that looking at Haptel alone, it's not enough evidence to say that, privatization at this point is key. Maybe if you are bringing in the private sector, it shouldn't be just one person, maybe open it up for others to play. Do you think that should it be just the collection side or the last point of distribution, or it should be the whole privatization of ECG? Because I remember we tried it once, it failed.
Public-private partnership, where there are checks and balances, is the right way to go. If we are to concessionalize certain aspect of our distribution and observe the outcome and learn from that process, at least we can be able to monitor. Full privatization means that we are handing over the lights, the Black Star light, to a private entity. So
it's a national security
It's a national security concern. And you should know, if any light, for instance, what happened in the U.S. where Germany was intended to shut down gas supply to the U.S., and that became a key issue because they needed that power to hit up their turbines in many facilities in the country. That is the key concern here. If we want to do this, South Africa involved concessionary discussion with Akasio, Uganda involved Amene, and these are also concessionary provisions. They came in to support. So if we
so they're actually templates for us to follow, right?
Exactly, they're templates for us to follow. We can't just move into an open space because we are desperate. This is not time for us to work in desperation. It's time for us to sit with experts, get a proper roadmap, let books work in practice. Because if the money is moving where the product is, basically there will be consistent supply. But the cases where ECG is going to collect its money, is not meeting its target, independent power producers are selling the right amount that is required by ECG, yet the income that is supposed, the revenue that's supposed to come to ECG always falls short, not because ECG staff are not doing their work, not because ECG is inefficient, but because the system or templates that ECG is working with is not helping. For instance, when the Haptel structure came in, digitalization, it became quite eminent. However, there are still challenges. Getting access to meters is an issue for most people. If you go to ECG, some of them, it takes weeks, months. You have to pass behind the system or go beyond the structures to get someone to pay before you can get access to the meter. And that should not be the case. ECG as an entity, you can say you can just request for a meter from your mobile phone. Automatically, they get expert within the 3 days because they are service providers. Because when you don't pay, then you get case. Somewhere in Cote d'Ivoire, what is happening now is if you have a debt, you pay light. Within 3 days, if you do not pay what you owe as an individual, you will be sentenced to court. That's the case there. It's a criminal agenda not to pay your light bill, especially if you owe, because it's a state entity. It's run by the states. So if we are to legalize our revenue collection, for instance, if Bank of Ghana is owing, let them face the regulation provisions by PURC, which is backed by law, because indeed it's a revenue running institution that reports profit and losses, and this is something we have to privatize.
But I think that if you look at the entire energy structure, for instance, I feel that it goes beyond just the ECG, right? Yes. The inefficiencies in the ECG. For one, I think that the current mix is not really helping. For a country like Ghana, that every year, right, you need about more than $10 billion as import bill. Mm-hmm. You need about $40 million to pay independent power producers every month. This is the same country that has a very, very weak domestic currency. Do you think that, it was the same Mahama that introduced, at that point in time, I'm sure it was a short-term fix. But we understand that since they introduced that thing somewhere 2015, 2016, we've still not been able to improve on so many other alternatives like solar and what have you. We saw a number of campaign promises, both by the MPP and NDC, how they were going to substitute the thermal energy that cost us so much. I think that the first institution that gave us, that actually put out the outlook for this year was the Energy Commission. And Winston, if you look at their estimation, the Energy Commission believes that 2024 projection of $1.14 billion to buy fuel in this year is supposed to increase about $1.25 billion. Mm-hmm. If you do the math, that's about 10% increment. The question has to do with a country like Ghana. Where do we find money to buy gas or natural gas? We produce some in abundance, but production is very important. The cost of production, which sometimes in dollars and what have you, $100 million to be powering thermal plants. Are we at this point, in danger where more than 60% of our energy mix is completely thermal? That depends on fuel.
Since we started paying the energy sector recovery levy,
bring that in.
I'm wondering when will we recover?
And where will we stabilize?
Exactly, because there should be a trajectory.
Yeah.
How many years? If you go into proper planning, right, and forecasting, as a data analyst, you can tell that within this period, within this time frame, what must be done, strategies, policies that will lead you to a particular destination. Countries are growing. Road, electricity should not be the bane of any citizen in any country, because government are supposed to make sure that those things are done, because individuals pay tax, VAT and any product tax, everyone is doing their bit. So now there are many street lights that are off. There are many roads that are dark. Yet if you buy electricity within your bill, you find that you are paying
street lights.
Yeah,
the Lekman
road. You look at your road, you don't find them there. So these are major concerns that we face as individuals. These are major concerns or hurdle that is on the path or in the books or on the neck of the new government.
Now Winston, talking about light out, that people had light out, but I think that there's one ardent, audience, Melody Boateng. She watches Beyond the Numbers almost every time. And I think that is good that we say, a shout out to Melody Boateng inside Dansoman, I think somewhere around Russia Road, right? Russia Road. I don't know if she witnessed Lighthouse yesterday, but I did this morning. And on the Lekman Road,
there's also
street light isn't working.
Ohima always watching us.
Oh, wow.
Atomic, yes. There are many people watching, and if you're watching us anywhere, we'll do as much as possible to bring you up to date on what is happening. This is our first edition of the year. Expect more outstanding analysis here on Beyond the Numbers. My name is Winston Taki, and I...
Isaac Ofeja. Will see you next week.